she touched some of the highlights, but I kind of talk about what it is I do. And yeah, I am a local, and I've been here over 45 years now. And in the fire service, I started in the fire service in '94. Just to get my foot in the door with the Forest Service, I took the Mount Union lookout position. And then every day that I had off of the tower, I drove all the way from Mount Union over to the fire center out there at the airport, asking if anybody had quit on the shot crew yet. So eventually somebody quit, and they released me from the tower, and that kind of started getting me into the heavy side of being a firefighter. And so all in all, if you count up all my years here and there and everywhere, I've got about 10 years with the Forest Service and 20 plus years now with the city of Prescott. It was a really good gig back in the day to work wildland in the summer and then be a high school chemistry teacher in the winter. So that was kind of my gig. I would do summer wildland and then indoors in the summer being a school teacher. When the school district said they wanted to go to year-round schooling, I bailed and went and got on a red fire truck instead. And then I just run the department's youth program. So I still get to work with high school kids. I just do it on my terms and don't have to keep a grade book. So that works out pretty slick for me. I actually retired in '21, went back to working for the Forest Service. I was an AD working at the tanker base with Pete back there, out there on the tarmac, doing this, real fancy work, you know. Somebody's got to do it. The city created a brand new position called the Wildfire Risk Manager. And that position had never been in existence on the department, and guys on the floor were reaching out to me saying, hey Conrad, have you heard about this new position that Chief's making? And so I pulled it up and I'm like, oh my gosh, it sounds like a wildfire school teacher. And so with my background, it just made sense. So I had that conversation with my wife. I went and saw the chief, said, what is this position about? And the missions and duties associated with that position really jibed well with me and my history. So I went ahead and applied and got the position. So what does my position entail as Wildfire Risk Manager? One of the biggest things is a liaison with the forestry crew. Now, I think everybody in this room is intimately familiar, okay? The forestry crew, way back in '01, started off as the brush crew, eventually becomes the shot crew. The shot crew passes. We maintain the crew itself, but they've lost their fire capacity at that point. And so we kept them in the fire umbrella for several years after that, and it wasn't working well. We had to figure out a better way of doing it. And so what we decided to do, or what they decided to do, this is prior to me coming back, is they took that crew and moved them over into park services. Okay, so rec services, when you stop and think about it, has over 3,000 acres of open space and parks, which are a wildfire threat to the city of Prescott. So it's kind of the concept of returning to their roots, as it were. That was what they originally did way back in the day when they were first established. They would literally go door to door. If they had a grant that they were operating off of, they would go door to door and say, hi, Mrs. Smith, I don't know if you noticed, we're doing vegetation removal at the property next door. Would you like us to do that at your place? And they would do, I mean, they did something like 300 and something houses the first year that they were up and running. So they've returned to their roots, but they're under rec services. But a lot of what they do is fire related. So like right now they are working over by the Constellation Trailhead doing a fuels reduction project. Well, that's fire related. Guess what? That's our fire department grant at work. So we need to have that back and forth, that some of the work that they're doing isn't just about trimming up dead branches off of a cottonwood tree at Granite Creek Park, but is actually associated with doing some kind of fire risk reduction within our community. So that's my part. So in fact, before coming here, I spent the last hour hiking a parcel out in the Granite Dells with the forestry crew and a local ecologist. Walt Anderson was down there, and the Arizona Conservancy group. We were hiking through the brush out there trying to figure out what we can do next to help protect the Granite Dells area. Along those similar lines, we do long-term planning for how do we treat those 3,000 acres. So that's a big piece of my job, is to figure out how we objectively determine which properties need to be taken care of. Because the city of Prescott owns a lot of pieces of property, everything from little pump houses to big, large park areas. and they all have different levels of relevance based on their infrastructure, their historical value, their fire threat. So we're trying to figure out that long term, how do we protect the community and address all these pieces of property. Try to find grant monies to offset the expenses. So like doing the treatment at Constellation Trail, and we're also doing an invasive species project at Willow Lake. The state's paying for the lion's share of that. Those are 80-20 grants, so the city only has to pay 20% of that. Also a big portion of my job is doing wildland interface code enforcement. City of Prescott since 2006 has had a wildland urban interface code that we enforce. So anything new that's built in 80% of Prescott, there's a couple little zones that aren't in the WUI, the wildland urban interface, all has to be built to a certain code for building construction style as well as vegetation. So I do all the vegetation inspections. My cohorts in the office at admin, they take care of the building components stuff. And then a large piece of my job is doing home ignition zone inspections, where somebody's like maybe new to the area and they hear the term firewise, they hear the term defensible space, but they're not sure what that means, what that looks like. So they ask me to come over. I have a very nice computer system that we photograph everything for them, and that way they can have it as a reference, like how to improve their property. I'm sure somebody in this room has probably experienced a non-renewal from their insurance company by now. I live smack dab in the center of Prescott, right by Taylor Hicks School. Lost my insurance, non-renewal. So this isn't a border of Prescott thing. We're seeing it all the way from Dewey, all the way out to Chino. My aunt lives on the very far northwest corner of Chino. She just lost her insurance. So we're seeing it everywhere, and part of my goal is to make people's houses be better so their insurance companies will bring them back on board, and then also kind of work with the state legislature and the national legislature to figure out what does this look like in the long term, where we can make our homes better and be insurable and have insurance companies come back into our community without fear because we're doing the right thing. We have contemporary wildland codes. We have people that are buying in, they're doing defensible space, they're getting inspections, they're improving their properties. Make it so the insurance companies are willing to come back, okay? Because we have a lot of them that are pulling out at this point. And then the last aspect of my job is a lot of public relations. I do speaking events like this pretty much every single week. And sometimes my educational component is talking to 1 or 2 homeowners, but a lot of times it's like this, talking to a group of anywhere from 20 to 200 people. So getting out there and sending out the message. Now, Celeste came to me and asked me to come down here and talk today, and she said specifically, like, what's going on around Prescott as far as mitigations and improvements to the surroundings, to our community, to make it more resilient so we don't end up with a Lahaina, or so we don't end up with a LA fire or a Palisades or camp or anything. I mean, we've got a lot of horrible examples that we don't want to have experienced here. And heaven knows we've had enough of the bad stuff, right? So for me, it's the why. Why am I here today? Isn't so much about I want to talk to you about those projects. The why that I'm here today is because this community matters to me. And like I said, I've been here over 40 years. This place matters. I don't want to see a neighborhood get destroyed like Lahaina, where you have one house that survives in an area, okay? And you stop and think about what that one surviving house, how they felt the next morning. Is that the best day ever because, woohoo, our house survived? No. That's the worst day ever because they lost their community. And community matters here. It really does. We live in some kind of weird fairy tale bubble around here. Community really, really does matter here. And so I take it real personally. That's why I came out of retirement, because it was an opportunity for me to continue the message and continue improvements. Okay? So, if you haven't seen this is from the Department of the Interior. This is at wildfirerisk.org. And this is the Department's of Interior opinion on the Prescott area. So I throw it up there because there's just a lot of red, and it should be on your radar immediately that, yeah, we've got some issues. And I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here. You guys know, okay? So Prescott is up here on this, and This is wildfire consequences, like how much destruction are we looking at and how likely is it to be destroyed. And so just to kind of put things in perspective, it's hard to see from the back, but there's a very large red dot kind of just down to us. So not as much destruction, but a little more likely to happen. That big red dot is LA. So just to put it in perspective, LA, not as destructive as it would be for us. So if it happens here, it's not going to be pretty. So I highly encourage you to go to wildfirerisk.org. You can actually pull up each of these individual sections and kind of look. We have an interesting vulnerable population component because our demographic has drifted toward the retirement end. So we have a lot more folks that have communications issues. Maybe they don't hear, they can't see, they don't drive, they're some limitation of disability. So it adds to our vulnerable population. Like, how is the messaging going out? And some people are not cell phone savvy, so maybe they don't have Genesis Protect to tell them to evacuate. Then Marty and I talk about this on a regular basis. Like, it's a challenge to make sure we're still getting message out both to the new tech and to the old tech. So it is. So I get asked this question a lot. And I see it posted on Nextdoor and a couple other places. You'll see people argue about whether or not FireWise, does it do it? Is it enough? And we're struggling with the challenge of, is it enough? Do the insurance, if you say, do the insurance companies care? If you say that you are in a FireWise neighborhood, or you've conducted FireWise or defensible space actions around your home, does it make a difference? And I'll tell you, maybe, okay? And when I say that, it's because every one of those companies, those insurance companies, are for profit. So they are all deciding how much risk they are willing or not willing to take on, what that risk profile looks like. So some of them, if you can show that you've done FireWise defensible space around your property, they will bring you back on board. Some of those insurance companies, Progressive is notorious. I get more complaints. I have a whiteboard in my office. I keep track of who I'm getting complaints about and who I'm getting kudos from, and I keep track of that. And so unfortunately, Progressive has been one of the ones I get the most complaints about. USAA, on the opposite end of the spectrum. I get more people touting how happy they are with USAA at the other end of the spectrum. What can we do to help drive that and make more companies behave like USAA? Well, we're going to have to start with our own homes, and then that messaging has to go from what we call parcel level, the house, to what does your neighborhood look like, what does our community look like, and then what is our whole, like us with the Forest Service and BLM and state land, what does our whole region look like? And so it's really important that we start knocking that stuff off on all those levels. But we have to start at the parcel level because, quite frankly, 80% of the homes that get destroyed in a wildland fire are from the embers that land on the house. So you probably ought to go out there and do something to make it so if the embers land on your house, it's no big deal. Okay? So you got to start there. We all tend to focus on this right here, which is FireWise and defensible space. I know it's really micro font, but you don't need to see the font, okay? I'll read them to you, at least in part. I'm not going to read everything at you. This is the concept of fire-adapted communities. And what it is it's kind of a paradigm shift where we've been so focused on FireWise, 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 we need to start thinking bigger, broader, the holistic approach. You need to be thinking about preparation, which is what FireWise and defensible space is, but we need to make sure that's integrated with our fire response, how our engines are responding, how our firefighters are trained, and as well as we live in an area that's going to have wildland fires. We know it. It does, regularly, sometimes catastrophically. How informed are our community members about getting back into their homes? Not just the evacuation process, but like when can you get back into your home? What kind of stuff do you need for your insurance? What toxic issues? You're on a well? Is your well contaminated because we just had a wildland fire and all that hazardous material is going to soak into the soil? These are all things that we need to think on in whole and not just be focused on just the fire-wise component. We really need to start thinking big picture. So that was when Chief Dura hired me on, that's where he said he wanted me to start thinking, pushing the messaging that direction. Now, today we're just going to talk about one piece of the pie. We're going to talk about landscape treatments, thinning, fuel breaks, prescribed fire. We're not going to talk about the whole big pie, okay? I do the big pie on like hour-and-a-half long, 2-hour presentations, stuff like that. So I do the big pie. If anybody is a member of OLLI, I'll be speaking speaking out at the PV campus, and that's where I go deep dive into a lot more stuff. So I'm just going to do a quick nod, and this is nowhere near a complete list. We live in a really weird place. I kid you not. We have a level of collaboration and cooperation that exists here in the Yavapai, Prescott Basin area that doesn't exist in other parts of the nation. It's really strange. And there's a couple in here that have heard me tell this story before. I didn't know how weird it was here until I went someplace else. So one of the things that I would do when I was working on an engine is we would take engines off district. So if a fire in California, we would take an engine, I would be the engine boss, I'd have a crew, and we would go fight fire in California, Idaho, Nevada, wherever. One time, I'm in Southern California, we've been doing initial attack every day, going out, knocking down fires. There's a day where there's no fire for us. They're like, well, we're going to stage you over here in Lake Elsinore at the Forest Service office, which is like right next to the highway. It's so weird, you know, you're like big old highway and there's a Forest Service station. It's all built up all around it. 10 o'clock in the morning, smoke on the other side of the highways. So like 6 lanes over, column of smoke at the base of a hill, probably, I don't know, half the size of Glassford. I tell my crew, hey, get dressed. You know, my guys are putting on their yellows, kicking on their hard hats, gearing up. And the Forest Service guys are like, what are you guys doing? The thing, you know, the thing that we do? And they're like, oh no. What do you mean, oh no? Like, oh, that's CDF, which CAL FIRE now, but it was CDF at the time. So they're like, no, that's a CDF fire. We don't do that unless they call us. I go, you got to be, we can be there in like 6-7 minutes. Like, nope. They'll call us when it's time to pick up the hose. I'm like, you guys are messing with me. Sure enough, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we finally got dispatched, and it was to go collect hose. And by then it was like pushing 100 acres, I don't know, like 68 acres, something like that. Stupid. Your firefighters don't behave that way here. We train together, we co-house. We have a CAFMA, Central Arizona Fire Station, that has a green Forest Service rig that runs out of it. Station 71 with Prescott Fire Department runs a green engine on it. When I was still at the Forest Service, I ran out of Station 71. That's how we operate. We train, we do the basin drill, which is the beginning of April every year. And that is a unified training event for us to bring all of our cooperators and collaborators together to do a fake fire. Kind of like knock the dust off before we get into peak fire season, so we're all ready to go. So that's with intent, and it pays off. We make sure that all of our communications are good. We're all using the same radio frequencies. So it's a big deal. And we have what are we call automatic aid agreements here. In other places, they have mutual aid agreements. That is, I'm willing to go help you, but you need to call me first. Okay, so if you got something going on, I'll sit there and watch the smoke, like at Lake Elsinore, till you call and say, yes, please come give me a hand. We don't do that nonsense here. We do have automatic aids, we send everything, and we don't care the color of the engine that's closest. Okay? Closest engine goes, and we start stacking up everything behind it. Apparently that's not how they play elsewhere, so please recognize. And when we do these events, we bring in all of these people and many others in different, every year we kind of try to mix it up so it's not the same thing. But I'm just kind of listing off some, just to demonstrate, we've got nonprofit groups that are a part of this process. We have federal agencies, we've got state agencies, we've got local agencies, we've got mom and pop volunteer departments. We all play together and we all involve one another in this process to make us all be more successful. And it really is a beautiful thing. So I want you to know what the city of Prescott does. I can't speak to the offerings of those other agencies, but they, by and large, offer a lot of the same kinds of things that may just look a little bit different. So, the city of Prescott, you'll notice that prevention is a big deal. We do a lot more on the prevention side, so we don't have to try to do as much on the other side. So with prevention, we have the Wildland Urban Interface Building Codes. We're actually reevaluating, the 2024 code is out, and we're evaluating how or what aspects of it we will implement going forward. We are currently using 2012's policies, which if you think about it, if you're an insurance company looking at Prescott, and they're using 2012's policy when there is a new set of codes for 2024, as an insurance company, you got to ask yourself, why? Why are they choosing not to adopt the most contemporary codes? Are they serious about Wildland Urban Interface? And that's a concern for me, is that we're going to get so much kickback on those most contemporary codes that it might make us look really bad in the eyes of insurance. They created my position. I do a lot of public outreach. We do free vegetation disposal, if you're not familiar, every April, every Saturday. We do that, and you can also do once a year in Prescott, you can do an annual bulk dump. It's got a little bit different rules to it, but you can still get rid of a lot of stuff. We offer free defensible space inspections, which I already talked about. We have a chipping service that some people still apparently don't know about. On Fridays, the forestry crew, in their efforts to do fire-related stuff, drive around Prescott and chip stuff. So if you've been trimming all your trees up to 6 foot high on your property and all you've got is a geo tracker to drive to the transfer station, you don't need to. You can just drag that brush out to the curb. You go to prescottfire.org, right at the top of the page, it says chipping request. You click on that, type in your address, they tell you which Friday they're going to be in your neighborhood. It's that simple, and it's free, and you can use it as many times as you need. You just got to recognize that they do a different part of town each Friday, so it may be a couple weeks till they get back around to you. We do offer mitigation grants. Not everybody's physically able to go out there and do the work. So a mitigation grant is, what we have is, if you need to have landscaping done and it costs over $1,000, and you live in a fire-wise neighborhood, you can go through the application process, get approved, and then when your landscaper's done, you submit, you've paid the bill, you submit to the city, to me, and then we reimburse you $500. So it's I only have 12 of them a year, okay? So they go fast, but at least it's $500 off to get some landscaping done at your place. But it does have rules, and don't jump the gun. Actually follow the steps if you're somebody who's wanting to take advantage of that. We offer a roll-off dumpster. I actually did it yesterday. The Hazley Homestead Hidden Valley Ranch wanted to do some community brush dumping, so I brought in a 40-yard dumpster, parked it there first thing in the morning, and all day long residents that had brush on their property brought it down, threw it into the dumpster. End of the day, solid waste came and picked it up and hauled it off for me. No charge to the community, okay? And that one doesn't matter if they're fire-wise or not. It's just if a neighborhood wants to do some kind of community improvement, we'll help support that. We have a great relationship with Yavapai Firewise, formerly Powick. We value their relationship and our ability to communicate back and forth so much that we actually gave them an office in our administration. So Anita, who is their paid personnel, is 3 doors down from me, and she and I are constantly exchanging information. And then we still have the forestry crew that's out there doing solid work all the time, every day. Like I said, right today they're out there working on the Constellation project. Suppression, every single firefighter on every single engine is 130, 190 qualified. That means they can do basic wildland firefighting. And then we have handfuls of folks as you start going up the food chain. So like for myself, I'm as high as a strike team leader. So you got firefighters, and you got engine boss, and you got strike team leader. And so we have folks that are higher up and have different command levels associated with them. We have automatic aid agreements I already talked about, basin drill I already talked about, co-housing I already talked about. These are the things that are on the horizon. The big ticket item that I'm working on this year is the CWPP, which is the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. What is that? CWPP is a plan of not what's important to Conrad, but what's important to you in relation to wildland fire. And that could be anything from maybe you live in an area of town where the roads are kind of narrow, kind of rinky, and everything's overgrown. So maybe your personal interest is maybe we need to widen up the roads so we can get fire vehicles in there. Maybe you have lung issues. So when they're doing prescribed fire, it's a challenge for you. So maybe you'd like to see some kind of, like Flagstaff does. Flagstaff has a Connex box of HEPA filters. So if you're having difficulty breathing, you can call 24 hours a day, and there's one intern who has the phone, and if his phone rings, he drives to the Connex box, he goes and gets a HEPA filter unit and takes it to your house to help get the smoke out of your house. Okay? So, but a CWPP is community-based, looking at what you feel the important stuff is. Now granted, there's firefighters that kind of help guide some of that, but it is also a gateway to getting additional federal funding and state funding. So there's certain federal funds that will not give you money unless you have a CWPP in place. Prescott, City of Prescott does not have a CWPP of its own. We have a regional CWPP for Yavapai County, and it's not very specific. So it really doesn't, if I needed HEPA filters and I was going to write a grant to get HEPA filters, there's really nothing in the county CWPP that would help drive that purchase. So I wouldn't be able to get those kinds of grants. So that's why we want to have that this year. And then I'm constantly expanding our fire adapted community repertoire and talking points and stuff like that. And by doing all these things, we're improving our regional relevance. We were really, really strong at the time when we lost the guys. And as a community, we very much retracted from wildland firefighting and in all ways, shapes, and forms, from personal levels to department levels to community levels. We didn't want to suffer that pain again. And so it made us very much viscerally retract. And that doesn't make the threat of wildfire go away. And so we need to bring that back around and bring our regional relevance back into play. And we're doing that in a stepwise fashion. City of Prescott will be hosting this year's Arizona Wildland Urban Interface Summit, which is a statewide summit. Last year it was held down in Tucson. This year we're going to hold it here in Prescott. We're going to hold it right downtown at Sam Hill Warehouse, and we've got a couple hotels set up to help facilitate all the people that are going to be coming into town for that. So we're trying to get our relevance back in place. So let's talk about what treatments are going on around in the Prescott area. So these are kind of the big ticket. I'm going to do like really high level stuff. All right. So we see a lot of prescribed fire, also written as RX fire, mechanical thinning. We're driving around with equipment. There's a variety of tools that we can grind up stuff with. Manual thinning, like we'll go out with chainsaws because it's a more delicate area. Maybe it's a little steeper, rocky terrain, whatever. It's not appropriate for mechanical equipment. So we'll get in there with chainsaws and chop stuff up. Grazing, and that can be often either cattle or goats. I'm still trying to find a goat project that I can pull off. No, I'm serious. I think it's a really cool opportunity. I missed it by that much this past year. Thumb Butte, the Arizona Conservancy had 3 acres that they needed to treat. City of Prescott has 7 acres right next to it. The goat guy wouldn't do less than 10 acres. So if you put them together, we could get it done. And so we had them all lined up, and then when we started doing the contractual stuff, he refused to get insurance. He's like, oh, if you want me to be insured, you guys are going to need to spot for that. I'm like, that's not how the City of Prescott works. You come insured. So I don't want your goat getting out and eating the trim off a Tesla or something, you know? So, yeah, not happening. But I'm trying to get the goats. I don't want that to happen. And then there's chemical treatments, which is a challenge. There's some places where it's really required to have some kind of level of chemical treatment, especially like Tree of Heaven is totally tenacious, and if any of you seen the Courier articles in the last couple weeks, and it's something we're dealing with in Willow Lake and in Granite Dells also, and then all around town. Invasive species, Siberian elm, tamarisk. We've got some tamarisk down at Willow Lake and here and there everywhere around town. A lot of those, you really, if you want to be efficient and effective and only have to do it once or maybe twice, you need to do some kind of chemical treatment. but it's not very well received within the populace because of just the associations with using chemical treatments. So it is very much a challenge. The other chart just talks about like thinking about things that if we do treatments, what we improve. So our water's safe to drink, no loss of structures, no loss of infrastructure, which is usually lost on people. Power lines, we have a lot of above ground power lines. So you burn up all those poles, the replacement of all that gets challenging. Our health, the possibility of personal life lost. So there's a lot of things that by doing prevention, we're not going to put them at risk and we're going to retain them. And there's a huge difference in cost. So cost of preventive maintenance, I don't know how well you can see it from the back. Slash burning is $167 an acre. This is averages. Prescribed natural fire, 103. Management ignited fires, so like we're going to go and do some burning, about 78 per acre, and then just letting a grassland burn occur, 57. So pretty cheap when you compare it to suppression, where we have to come in and it'll be anywhere from $300 to $1,000 an acre to do it. So, and if there's an air operation associated with it, like a large scale fire that's going to use tankers and any air support, $1 million a day, Pete, you think? I mean, your standard issue big large scale fire like Dragon Bravo is $1 million a day.
That could be just the aircraft, not everything. Over $1 million. So there's also logistics costs that's not always factored in these statistics. Yeah. You set up a team and feed 1,000 firefighters and provide maps, vehicle inspection, and all that stuff, and keep it. The cost goes up. That's why you see millions of dollars for a large fire, tens of millions.
Yeah, I haven't seen the latest. You know, Dragon Bravo is just shy of 150,000 acres, but it's a multi-million-dollar affair at this point. So, because Celeste asked me to kind of like talk about what's going on here in the area, I want to introduce you to something. I'm going to show you still shots of it. I'm not going to be able to show you live shots because of just how we're configured here. But this website is totally public access. So reshapewildfire.org. So reshapewildfire.org is a housing of everybody's treatment work. Now it's starting off with mostly the Forest Service stuff, but we're slowly getting the BLM stuff and the state stuff and the city's stuff. We're slowly adding in to the twig viewer. Okay, that's the treatments. And I'm going to show you some shots of this, what this looks like. Okay, when you go in and look at the twig viewer, which will be this toggle right here if you go to reshapewildfire.org, when you open it up, it's kind of preloaded with just historic wildfires. We've had some big fires, and so like this map of the general Prescott area, you can see there's the Dosey fire is on there, both of them, the original one and the later one later. Crooks fires in there and a couple other fires. The Goodwin fire is actually highlighted here, and it gives you all the data on it. How big did it get? What kind of fuels was it in? Who was on it? Who was in charge of it? It gives you all this historical information. Why this is super useful to a guy like me is when I write a grant, I have to show historical large fires in the Prescott area and lots of other little minutia details associated with that. So this is a great resource for me to be able to do that. And we're not even going to deep dive into some of these other things over here. I can actually pull up congressional districts because that's also a part of your grant writing if you're writing grants. You can find out who the congressmen are associated with these different areas where you might be doing your work. So you can toggle the fires. Now, I'm going to show you this next slide. These are the fires that got big. These are the fires that didn't. So just so you have some kind of really, I love the visual on this because it just shows you over the last several decades all these different, and if you can take your cursor and click on each one of these and it'll tell you this was 1/10 of an acre, this was just a abandoned campfire, all of that, okay? So when you go from like, we only had this many bad things when we had this much potential, we're doing some things right. Okay? So let's emphasize that. What are we doing right? All of these are treatment plans from PNF. All this color. I'm going to zoom in here in a second with it, and this is, if you click on any one of these, it will give you all the data about that. Like, so this one's clicked right here, and it is the Will Hoyt Mastication Project.
Would you mind pointing out to folks the city corporate boundary and then the forest boundary?
Yeah, it's abundantly obvious where the city's boundary is. Okay? Now, we have a couple treatment projects that we have done, but we haven't done a very good job of getting that data so it can land in here and become a part of this, and it needs to. So for me, this is like more things that Conrad must do, you know, like, so we need to get this on here so everybody can see what everybody's doing. That's super important. But again, you can pull up each of these projects. It'll tell you who's funding it, what the goal is, what the type. Is it lop and scatter? They're going to come in with chainsaws. Are they using a masticator? Are they using a steer skid? Steer skid. It'll look at all those different things, and it'll show you the boundaries for it. I'm going to zoom in on this next shot so you can really see kind of high and tight. Like, this is zoomed into the southern side of Prescott. And so you can see all these different, and the different colors are, is this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or is it a future project that they are planning? So PNF, hats off to them. They're doing a really good job trying to protect our community and manage what they've got in hand. So you can see that there are very few gaps in their process here. So this is some pretty strong stuff, and so I like showing it off. Now, you either love it or you hate it. Prescribed fire. So I tell people, like, when I talk about prescribed fire, like, do a gut check. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you ambivalent? Most people aren't ambivalent. They either love it or they hate it. Me, personally, I love it. I recognize I actually have 2 degrees. One's a teaching degree. The other one's in biology with an ecology emphasis. Okay? So I recognize the importance of having fire in a fire ecosystem in a region where we should be having fires regularly. So it's super important stuff. So for me, I'm looking at all the pros. It punches back how much fuel's in there. Some vegetation only is going to grow after we've had a fire. Fire-dependent ecosystems. Do you know that for a while there was no sequoias growing? The only sequoias that there were the sequoias that there were. They couldn't get any of the little babies to grow. This is, this is a few years back when they figured this out. It's because that was a fire-prone area. And the fires would actually pop open those cones and give the opportunity for the sequoias to seed. So some places are just flat out dependent on fire. And if you don't have it, and if you don't have it at the right time, this is the thing I struggle with as a guy with an ecology degree, is when we do a prescribed fire in November, that's not normal. So the entomological, the bugs and the molds and the mildews, the funguses, everything that's a part of that ecosystem is not necessarily in place in November. And you're starting to see the movement as they start to be willing to do prescribed fire kind of earlier in the fall and even later into the spring when the parameters meet prescription. They've got the right temperatures, they've got the right humidities, they've got the right winds. Everything's got to meet a certain prescription. It has to be just right. It's like if you're going to do a prescribed fire out north of Chino Valley, you're going to do it out there past Paulden, you have to have a wind as a part of your prescription. You have to have a sustained 10-mile-an-hour wind, gusts not over 25 or 30 or something like that. I can't remember what the parameters are. Because in order for it to go from juniper to juniper to juniper and through that really spotty grass it has to have wind. So if you're going to write a prescription for what that prescribed fire is going to look like out in Paulden Way, it looks way different than if you're going to do it down by Wolf Creek. Because heaven knows, we don't want a 15-mile-an-hour wind blowing on the fire in Wolf Creek south of Prescott. So totally different prescription. So another thing that I'm seeing more and more of is the invasive species. Bark beetle in particular is on everybody's radar. Bark beetle will proliferate unless we have really, really wicked cold winters. That's like the best natural funk to a bark beetle population. Okay, we haven't had a really cold, wicked winter in probably somewhere between pushing 15 years now. Really like single-digit stuff. So as a result, those bark beetle populations are pretty large. And then because nobody thins out any of the trees on their personal property because they want to hold on to every single ponderosa they have, they're all smashed up against each other. All these trees are non-robust. They're sharing water, they're sharing light, they're sharing nutrients, so they're all weak. And now this one gets bark beetle, and it's so close to in proximity to the next one, it propagates from tree to tree because those trees can't fight it off with their natural saps and resins and stuff like that to be resistant to it. And so now we start seeing large swaths of bark beetle kill. So if you look up Copper Basin Road, Timber Ridge, High Valley Ranch, you start looking, even the colorblind guy here can see the brown zones that are developing. So that's a huge problem. We haven't had a cold winter. If you do fires, you can thin stuff out, spread stuff out. In other areas, it's good for controlling ticks, and then the native tribal groups used to do it to expose danger. They'd flush out game, they could see snakes, stuff like that, so especially down in like the Louisiana, Florida region. But the cons, life safety risk, putting fire on the ground is always inherently dangerous. Okay, we risk having property destruction. Habitat destruction. So I guarantee you, every single prescribed fire that gets conducted by Prescott National Forest every single year, somebody gets on Nextdoor and starts talking about the horrors that the blue jays and the squirrels are enduring because there is a prescribed fire going on. Everybody's got a different opinion on that one. Okay, yeah. So I'm not telling you it's good or bad. You know how you feel about the birds and the bunnies and stuff like that. So it's going to be a lot worse property destruction and habitat destruction if we don't do some level of management in an area that should always have fire occurring on a regular basis. Big deal is are we going to have groundwater contamination, and then the most complaints, health risks. Okay, people. My dad he lives in Groom Creek, high altitude, poor breather, and so the prescribed fires really hurt him. So, and that's the thing that I love, that we're doing prescribed fire to balance stuff back out. And then there's the tourism impacts, and we do rely heavily on tourism here. So, trivia. What does the Civil War have to do with prescribed fire? Because it's prescribed, I mean, think about it. Does anybody know? No, I just happen to be it happens to be nominally relevant, Marty, because the Irish have something to do with it. Normally when we think the North and the South in the Civil War, we don't think about the Irish, okay? Now, somebody in here has probably seen, I'm trying to think of who's in that movie. Drawing a total blank. It's about 5 points. It's about 5 points. And it's got the guy from Titanic, DiCaprio, and it's Gangs of New York. There's a scene in Gangs of New York where the Irish are showing up on the boat coming from Ireland, and they're being shuttled right back onto a boat to go south and fight for the North, earn your place in America, go fight for the North, and go fight the rebels down south. So they're just being marched off, marched on, and they go south. These Irishmen, these Scotsmen, they all end up, a huge population of them, down south. And after the war, they stayed. Like, I like it here, staying. I'm not going back up north. Last time I did that, they stuck me in a boat and sent me down here. So they stayed. And so you end up with this disparity of populations where there's a larger Scottish and Irish population to the south, whereas the northern population has a lot more English heritage. The English did not historically use prescribed fire as a part of their farming technique. Scots and Irish did. So the Southerners start developing a certain reputation for lighting it off, which was totally in alignment with the natural tribe. The tribes, the Indian tribes that were there, had been doing the same thing. So they're all on board. Post-war, who takes over all the high value positions in the agencies? The victorious North. So you have a disparity between who's on the ground, the boots on the ground, and who's managing things. So the Northerners, a lot of English background, they didn't like wildland fire. They didn't use wildland fire as part of their farming. And then this happens. So if you're not familiar with this particular lovely event in wildfire history, October 8th, 1871, the Chicago fire, and on that same night, Michigan has 3 wildland fires. So between the two, we're pushing 4 million acres burned in a series of a couple days. Hundreds, if not thousands of lives lost. And if you stop and think about it, it's the Wallow Fire plus the Rodeo Chetasky, plus the Wallow Fire plus the Rodeo Chetasky, plus the Wallow Fire plus the Rodeo Chetasky, plus the Wallow. Okay? So we all know, if you've been here for any length of time, how big and horrible those fires were. So now let's do that all in 1 week, 4 times over. And I know a couple of people here know when these happened. Some of you, this may be like, I've never even heard of this, and it was massively destructive. Because there was another fire that night that wasn't a wildland fire. Okay? The Great Fire of Chicago. And so that's what made the headlines. So most people don't know about these catastrophic wildland fires that happen. So, like I said, Northerners start getting the top positions, very anti-wildland fire, very anti-prescribed fire. And so they start clamping down. And then they start the 10 a.m. policy. All fires will be out by 10 a.m. the next morning. Shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. And then, inadvertently, one of the best anti-wildfire campaigns in the world, in our history, comes out of Smoky. And they ran Smoky hard. Luckily, the message has changed some now, but at the time, I mean, they were showing horrible movies to people in the South to try to get them to convert to be anti-prescribed fire. We don't want you running out there burning. They just, millions and millions of people got indoctrinated with fire bad, fire bad, fire bad. And yeah, destructive fire's bad. Good ecological fire is actually good ecological fire. So it causes a disparity in a lot of folks because they've just always heard wildfire bad, and it's lost the context. Luckily, because we do better now, we've started to change that messaging back around. So we're trying to bring it back from this very, very anti-prescribed fire stance. Are we getting it back? Maybe a little bit. We've had studies that show the value of doing prescribed fire, how it improves species, improves habitat. If you're a hunter, it improves hunting habitats by introducing mosaics of different fuel types and different species that get to live in those areas. So by the early 60s, the National Park Service actually started coming back around and started utilizing prescribed fire more and doing wildland firefighting as suppression as well. So we started having a big movement, and then so as we started getting better about getting what they called restorative conditions, like trying to get things back to a previous look, every once in a while we run into something tragic that makes us think maybe prescribed fire or allowing areas to burn isn't such a good thing. Okay? In the 80s, Yellowstone. So Yellowstone ended up burning up a bunch of Yellowstone, so there was, again, a retraction from prescribed fire. And obviously, near and dear to several of our hearts, okay, the Dragon Bravo took out an absolutely historically beautiful building that I have spent half of my anniversaries with my wife sitting in the dining room eating, overlooking that. So, and that's a scenario where it started off as, okay, well, let's just let it do its thing and burn up some of this fuel in this area, and next thing we know, it's out and it's gone as big as it has. So undoubtedly, we will see a certain level of retraction again from prescribed fire as a result of the kickback from that. So, are we there yet? What does natural look like? It's kind of like keep Prescott, Prescott. Okay, you hear that statement, right? So does that mean the Prescott when I was a kid, when there was parking meters in front of every single parking space downtown? Or is it now, or was it the 50s? So this is something we run into, and what should the habitat look like? Should it look like back when Indian tribes were running here? Should it be back before that? You get a lot of disagreement as to what that needs to look like. And it makes for some pretty robust arguments. And these days, if you're going to do any treatments at all, prescribed fire, mechanical treatment, chemical treatment, any of those things, there's a lot more hoop jumping bureaucracy. You can't just say, hey, yeah, let's go burn that piece of dirt. Has it been evaluated as an arc site potentially, especially around here? We've got arc sites all over the place. Is it going to impact a watershed? So is it going to impact some kind of species? So like the Willow Lake project, we can only work Willow Lake from November 1st to February 28th because we don't want to impact the desert flycatcher breeding habitat. Very endangered species, so we're not going to mess with it. So, but it makes it so we can only work in there for 4 months in the dead of winter in the bottom of Willow Lake. So, but that's the parameters we got to work with. We still have a lot of folks that just from indoctrination can't get past the wildfire is bad thing. There is a good wildfire, but it's low intensity wildfires are good. Canopy fires running through neighborhoods, devastating entire regions. There's nothing good comes out of that. And then I got asked this question when I did my job interview. They asked me, how do you feel about doing prescribed fire in Prescott? I go, man, I think it's a great idea, but I'm probably not going to be the one willing to carry the drip torch to make it happen. Because we have so much at risk. I don't think you would ever find the political willpower to be able to conduct anything beyond like little small brush, like pile burns. And we have done that. But to do a broadcast burn where you just let all that leaf litter get consumed in a low intensity fire. I have a 1 acre piece of property in the middle of town that has oak leaf litter that's this thick. My soul of souls, I know, man, it would be really nice to light that on fire and just let that all go back into the soil and be good for the ecosystem and be good for the trees, put those nutrients back down in the ground. But man, I ain't letting anybody do a prescribed fire on my piece of property because I have the same fears the rest of you do. It's a real challenge. That's all I've got in relation to doing projects. I have no idea what kind of timestamp look like. Do we have any questions that are specific that either I can answer or any of our other well-known field associates from my cooperators? Yes, ma'am.
When you talk about the Prescott area, does that encompass Prescott Valley, Valley?
So when I get asked the question, your question is, when I talk about the Prescott area, how far does that go when I talk about the Prescott area? For me, my conversations regarding the Prescott area, I would say go out just a little past Paulden to the base of Mingus, all the way down to the Dewey Humboldt area. Goodwood and Fire is relevant to me. And then coming around the backside, you know, I have good rapport and relationships actually with people all the way down to Yarnell. The Weaver Mountains down in there are very active in the Yavapai County, the Yavapai Firewise Association. So if you're not aware, once a month there's a meeting that's held, the Yavapai Firewise facilitates, Yavapai County Office of Emergency Management hosts, and it allows all these different Firewise neighborhoods and cooperators and collaborators all to sit in one room and talk to each other about what's going on, issues they're facing. So I have a broader perspective, but usually when I'm talking to a group like this, it's usually Mingus, Dewey, you know, the south side of Prescott, Ponderosa Park, out to Paulden. That's where my focus is.
Neighborhood obviously means everyone needs to cooperate in that. Do presentations or do HOA?
All the time. The question is, do I do presentations for HOAs? I do. I do presentations for HOAs, and you can be a Firewise neighborhood and not be an HOA. Right. So like if my neighborhood's throwing around the idea right now, I can't and don't want to be in charge of it, so I highly encourage them to do it, and I'll serve on the board or whatever, but I can't be the facilitator. I got a job. Yes, you have to have at least 8 houses, but you can't have more than 2,000. So it's pretty broad, right? And here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize, not every home in the Firewise neighborhood has to be compliant. Being a Firewise neighborhood is about working towards a better neighborhood. So if we already had a perfect neighborhood, there's nothing to work towards. So, and quite frankly, it's the bell curve. We will have some people that are willing to eradicate every plant on their property, thinking that that's what Firewise means. And we'll have other people that are going to give you the bird and shoot you if you go anywhere near their property. You know, private property rights are kind of fundamental in the Constitution. There's a whole, so yeah, that's okay. We have to respect those people. But if we can move some of these people that are in the middle and get them more this direction, our whole resiliency improves. So that's why we try to get people to become Firewise as a neighborhood so they can get the good messaging out there and start moving the peg towards better resiliency. What else you got? Nothing else?
Did you, I didn't get a chance to go on that reshape. Is there something planned this fall that that the Prescott National Forest has as far as prescribed fire potentially?
Well, anytime the conditions allow for it, they will have, they've already written the prescription for several treatment areas. Like we would like to do pile burns here. We'd like to do what they call broadcast burn here. They've got those preloaded. So when the weather parameters are right for it, they can go, let's pull this one off the shelf and we'll make this one happen right now when the conditions are perfect for it. So they've got things preloaded, and some of those are on that map that it'll show, like we're intending on doing slash pile burning in down by Wolf Creek or something like that. So those are on. That's the nice thing about that map, is it shows not only stuff that's already happened, but the stuff, the prospective stuff that's on the future horizon. Yeah. Yes, Ms. Orange?
The conditions have been so dry. We had a couple of rainstorms last week, but it's still so extremely dry. Is it more dangerous to do prescribed burns, more dangerous to do very dry? I mean, even in the fall.
So that'll be interesting to see. So again, with the prescription, it's all things. How much fuel moisture is there? Because in some cases you want to really, really remove stuff. So you want you want it really dry, so it'll get rid of those materials. So like picture. It's going to be a terrible example. Picture an area where you've got a lot of dead and down. Like we had a microburst that knocked down a bunch of trees. So these trees are all, yay big around. You need that thing to be kind of dry in order to be able to get there and actually consume that wood and not just have like this burnt out log sitting there that really you didn't buy a whole lot. You want to consume that. You want that material to be gone. So those prescriptions are going to include that. Like we're looking for a fuel moisture range in this area. And if it's too dry and doesn't meet prescription, no, we're not going to put fire on the ground. Or if it's too wet, well, that's silly. Why would we try to burn wet logs? So, there has to be, again, prescription. It's got to meet that zone. Yeah? Anything else? Yes, Marty.
We didn't talk about it today, but it's just for everyone to think about. Over the last few years, there's been a what you might call proliferation of emergency notification and systems. First was the sheriff, maybe the first one. And then there's Genesis Protect, and there are a couple of other platforms out there. I think, not to solve the problem today, and I don't know if it is a problem in everybody's mind, but I think we need respecting civil liberties and all that, and the verbiage you mentioned, people. I think we need to think about describing a minimum emergency notification and response system that everyone in the county needs to have. It's just something to think about. everyone should sign up for Genesis Protect, for example. But it takes a little bit of
Yep.
getting used to.
When I do presentations at, like, say, a senior care facility or an assisted living facility, and that topic is going to come up, like, how are you getting your emergency notifications? I actually bring a 20-year-old with me so he can sit and help folks get the program loaded onto their phone. Because sometimes that's all the challenge there is. Once it's on their phone, there's not an issue. They'll get notified when they get notified. But making the hoop jumping process to get all the boxes filled to make those things happen. So, and if you're not familiar, Genesis Protect is the regional evacuation notice platform. It is an app you load onto your phone. You can either have it follow you around. That's what I do. I always want to get notifications. Or you can just have it always watch where your home is at. So I have it follow me around, but I have it watch where my wife is at, my home, because she works from home, and my parents' house out in Groom Creek. Because if my parents get evacuated, I want to know, because I know where they're going, my house. So, yeah, so like when the Crooks fire went out, like suddenly the Mustang was parked in the driveway and boxes were showing up in my garage, that kind of thing. So yeah, Genesis Protect is the evacuation platform. Alert Yavapai is what the county has used for years. It is just a registration. You go on it one and done. You go to Alert Yavapai, you put in your name, your address, and your preferred means of notification, and you're done with it. Okay? So we have redundancy built into the system. Some of us have Watch Duty, which is a nonprofit group that watches every single smoke west of the Mississippi. It's a nonprofit group. It's not a municipal group, but they cross-load their information. So if there's a Genesis notification, it'll pop up in Watch Duty as redundancy, saying, hey, zones 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all being evacuated, or they're all going to set status. So all the other stuff is just bells and whistles. Genesis Protect is like #1, and Alert Yavapai, just if you want to have a registry and you just don't want to have the gizmo on your phone. Yeah? Hey, thank you for your time today, everybody. Appreciate you coming out.